Good question here. For those who think the Illuminati is just the stuff of Hollywood, does not exist, or is not legitimately powerful any longer. How do we address those questions? Well, the Illuminati, secret societies of that kind, are very much part of Hollywood. Hollywood gives us a keyhole vision into what's going on. Not enough for the layman and the symbolically illiterate person to really connect the dots. And that's why so many of the world remain in ignorance about secret societies like this. But a little research, and this research includes going to the insiders, especially my work. It's always based in sources, numerous quotes, overwhelming amount of quotes, mostly from insiders and people who've made a study of this kind of symbolism. Second thing, and Hollywood helps in this in a way, and that is that research such as mine, which goes into these details about the Illuminati and other secret societies of that kind, is that we're just looking at their works. I'm reading the works of Freemasons. I'm reading the work of Knights Templar and Rosicrucians, Knights of Malta, etc. There's so many secret societies, and they have their own libraries and they have their own writings. And when it comes to looking at their artwork, it's the artwork that hangs in their lodges. It's the artwork that hangs in their famous shrines, like the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., or the Masonic halls that one finds in almost every town, let alone the big cities. It's also studying the architecture outside, the friezes of these great Masonic structures, as well as cathedrals, churches, and other sacred shrines. And then pulling back and even looking at our cities, because they weren't really designed for the purposes that we think. They were ritually designed. And so one looks to Hollywood and realizes that, you're not going to be told the whole story. But there have been times when there have been great whistleblowing movies, like Brotherhood of the Bell, and Skulls, and so many others we could mention, like National Treasure. Again, giving you sort of a keyhole view. You have to unpack all of that. You have to decode and decipher correctly all of these movies with the right keys. Otherwise, you might be coached, like in the case of the Da Vinci Code, it will go out to millions of people, but doesn't necessarily mean they've really cracked the code here. You could be swept along with what the secret societies want you to believe. And of course, that isn't going to work. As to their power, well, people like myself, after 20, 30 years of research into these matters, and again, as I said, it's going to the horse's mouth, realize that they're supremely powerful. They're very secretive, so, or at least their existence is no secret, but their behavior and their rites and rituals are guarded secrets. So they're not going to go out there and march down, the street to let you know. You have to go into your streets with open eyes and ask yourself, who built Bath? Who built London? Who built Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and Cologne and Paris? You may not understand completely all the secrets of these lodges and these societies and these fraternities, but you can easily see that something's been going on here from the year dot, and that takes tremendous power. How can a small country like England, since the 15th century almost, and carrying down through the centuries and decades, reach out through the whole world to get its predatory talents into the world, into mines, and into land, and then ruling the waves and all of that? How to this day can such a predatory, exploitatory organization like the Vatican, which is more than just the religion of Roman Catholicism, that's just one small wing of what goes on over in Rome, how can that order, that institution, after the crimes of which it's guilty, 500 years of the persecution of witches, so-called witches, just ordinary women doing their thing, healing and saving their tribes and bringing wisdom and knowing the secrets of architecture or agriculture and husbandry and looking after children, all those responsibilities. 500 or more years of total persecution. The numbers are in the tens of thousands. And that's just one instance of the pestilence of this order. That takes power, doesn't it? Well, the Catholic Church is very much aligned to the Knights of Malta, to the Knights of Columbus, and of course to the Knights Templar, one of the most powerful organizations in the world. Some of the top degrees of what we know to be Freemasonry are Templar degrees. These are chivalric orders, these are equestrian orders of enormous power. And the only reason we doubt their power or doubt even their existence is because we're not members of the club. This stuff goes on in the shadows and the periphery. So you have to make a detailed, lifelong study with many sacrifices involved in that process. In the dark, so to speak, you have to do this work because you're on the trail of a predator. And that predator is very powerful. It's not overwhelmingly powerful, and it can be destroyed or at least countered. But, you know, the reason why these predatory institutions exist is because of the fact that we either think they don't exist or because they wield no power. We don't know how evil works. We are extremely backward in that subject, actually. And we may be good as gold. We may be very humanitarian and caring about what goes on in the world around us. We may care very deeply about our brothers and sisters. But this tiger that's hiding in the long grass, how much actually do we know about its mentality, its habits, its psyche? It knows a great deal about us. And therefore, up until now, has been winning the great game. You know, and that situation has to change. But we start slowly, don't we? It's a great study. It takes its own time to learn. But you do it in gradual stages. My work is entirely dedicated to that. And it's been a long journey. But in programs such as Female Illuminati, which has been, you know, the work of decades of slowly piecing together, like an archaeologist does at a dig. And you don't know what the final vase is going to look like, but you carefully piece it together until finally that piece of parchment or that vase, you know, is assembled, and then one can stand back and study what it has to tell us about the world of the past. It's a great study, and one to which I personally am very much committed, because it all falls under the story of remedying the great war on consciousness, which has now been going on, you know, for millennia.
You can't continually be talking about tyrannies as if it is a gun to the head, you know, and we're being forced and coerced all the time. Sooner or later we're going to have to ask us a more deeper question. What is it that the slave is doing to not only bring about his own enslavement, but perhaps to even bring into being the enslavers? Because ultimately I believe that this master-slave thing is a relationship. It is in our relationships on the intimate domestic level, and it is further up the fractal. And as you know, 9 times out of 10 in the so-called conspiracy or alternative movement, that is not being dealt with. There's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of pointing out who the enemy is, and that's very valid and important. We need to do that. But I approach a lot of this stuff from an occult tradition, from a philosophical point of view, never forgetting that there is a relationship here between the parasite and the host. And to, in a couple of lines, just express what we were doing in Architects of Control for those who haven't seen it. Basically, we're asking a question, and that is man accepting tyranny in all its forms, both in intimate life and further up the fractal? Are we accepting that because we'd rather have external tyranny in any form than walk the road of selfhood? Now, I don't know, I say we're exploring it together. Is man so afraid of the burden, the weight of being a self? Is he so apprehensive about walking the Siddhartha road? Or he tries it and finds out, oh Jesus, that's a bit tough, that he then makes this sort of inner contract with himself to follow the gurus and to follow the leaders and the masters, so that these tyrants, both political and religious, exist? Because you won't find carrion crows and vultures in a Japanese tea garden. If you're finding maggots, the meat is rotten. If you're finding rats, it's a sewer. Like I said, the ego is the ghost that rose out of the self, the grave of the self. So once you start looking into this deeper relationship of what we are doing, our neglect, our avoidance of selfhood, could that be in some way causing the state of decay that we see? Because don't blame the vultures and the carrion crows. They're doing exactly what they need to do. The maggots are doing exactly what they need to do. If something's dead, then don't blame the maggots. So if the psyche is in a state of decay, don't blame the predators for coming by and setting up shop.